The DNA didn't match her. The fingerprints didn't match her. The blood at the scene didn't match her. Italy convicted her anyway. And when the world forced them to let her go, they convicted her again. This is not a story about guilt or innocence. We already know those answers. This is a story about what happens when a system decides who you are before anyone has looked at the evidence. Before we talk about Amanda Knox, we need to talk about Meredith Kercher, 21 years old, British and Indian descent, from South London. She came to Perugia to study European politics because she wanted to understand the world she intended to change. She rented a room in a stone cottage on Via della Pergola, in the medieval hilltop city of Perugia, Umbria. Her 3 housemates, 2 Italian women and 1 American. November 1st, 2007. All Saints' Day. Meredith Kercher spent the evening with British friends across town. She left around 9 p.m. She walked home. She was never seen alive again. The next morning, Amanda Knox came back to the cottage. The front door was unlocked. That was unusual. There were spots of blood in the bathroom. Small, almost easy to explain away. She showered. She went to her boyfriend's apartment. She came back. She brought her boyfriend, Rafael Salcedo, an Italian man, 23 years old. They tried Meredith's bedroom door. It was locked from the inside. Knox called the police. 2 officers arrived, from a completely different case. Stolen phones. They had no idea what they were walking into. They forced the door. Meredith Kercher was on the floor. She had been sexually assaulted. She had been stabbed in the throat. She was still partially covered by a duvet, as if someone had arranged her. The medical examiner would later estimate she died between 9 p.m. and midnight, the window during which she walked home. She almost certainly knew her killer. The prosecutor assigned to the case was Giuliano Mignini, a white Italian man in his mid-50s. He had recently been investigated and convicted of abuse of office in a separate case. His conviction was under appeal. His previous investigation had involved a theory about a satanic cult operating in Florence. He had wiretapped journalists. He had pursued a theory the evidence could not support. He had done it for years. Within 48 hours of Meredith's death, Mignini had a theory about Amanda Knox. He believed it was a sex game, that Knox had organized it, that she had held Meredith down while someone else did the killing. He had no evidence for this. He would spend 8 years looking for it. On November 5th, 4 days after the murder, police brought Knox in for overnight questioning. She was 21 years old. She had been in Italy for 2 months. She was alone. No lawyer was present. She hadn't been told she could have won. She was questioned in Italian, a language she had been studying for 2 months. The session lasted 14 hours. Officers later admitted they struck her on the back of the head. Twice. To, as they described it, help her remember. Knox maintains this happened. The Italian authorities deny it. There is no recording of the interrogation. Italy did not require them. At some point during those 14 hours, Knox broke. She wrote a statement. In it, she said she imagined being at the cottage that night. She imagined, her word, hearing Meredith scream. She named a man, her boss at a local bar, Patrick Lumumba. Patrick Lumumba was a black man from the Democratic Republic of Congo. He owned a small bar in Perugia where Knox worked part-time. He had no connection to the crime. He had spent the entire night at his bar. Multiple witnesses saw him. He was arrested at 6 a.m. He was put in a cell and told nothing. His family thought he had simply disappeared. Patrick Lumumba spent 2 weeks in prison for a murder he did not commit, because a frightened 21-year-old, struck and sleep-deprived and alone in a foreign interrogation room, wrote a statement the police wanted. Knox later recanted the statement immediately. She said she had written it in a state of terror, under physical and psychological pressure. She said she didn't know if it was real or imagined. The police had it. They didn't give it back. While Mignini was building his case against Knox, forensic teams were processing the crime scene, and the evidence they found told a completely different story. DNA on Meredith's body, a bloody handprint on the bedroom wall, feces left in the toilet, unflushed, shoe prints in blood. Every single piece pointed to one man, Rudy Guede. A black Italian man, 20 years old, born in Ivory Coast, raised in Perugia. He was known to Knox and Meredith. He was known to the neighborhood. He had a history of breaking into homes. After the murder, Guede left Italy. He fled to Germany. He did not go to the police. He did not report anything. He went to a nightclub in Mainz and danced. 11 days after Meredith Kercher died, police found Rudy Guede at a nightclub in Mainz, Germany. He was dancing. He was extradited to Italy, tried separately from Knox. Convicted, he received a 16-year sentence. Rudy Guede, the man whose DNA was inside Meredith Kercher's body, received 16 years. With Italian good behavior laws, he was released in 2021. He served 13 years. And yet, Magnini was not satisfied. He believed Guede had not acted alone. While the evidence pointed to Guede, the media had already decided who the real story was. British tabloids called her Foxy Knoxy, a nickname she had given herself on a childhood social media page, used ironically because she was clumsy on the soccer field. They reframed it as something sinister. They published photographs of her kissing Raphael outside the police station. They called it evidence of a cold nature. In Seattle, you might call it a frightened young woman seeking comfort from her boyfriend. They published photos of her doing yoga. Cartwheel photos from before the murder were treated as evidence. Evidence of what? Exactly, no one specified. The Italian press was worse. One headline called her a she-devil. Another suggested she had organized a satanic sex ritual, a theory that mapped almost exactly onto Magnini's previous investigation, the one involving the cult that didn't exist. By the time the trial began, the verdict had already been delivered in approximately 300 newspapers across 14 countries. The trial began January 2009. The prosecution's physical evidence consisted of 2 items: a kitchen knife and a bra clasp. The knife allegedly bore Knox's DNA on the handle and Meredith's DNA on the blade. The trace was so small it sat at the very edge of what could be detected. The knife was not found at the crime scene. It was taken from Rafael Salcido's kitchen, 3 weeks after the murder, because a detective said he thought it smelled like bleach. The bra clasp was left on the floor of the crime scene for 47 days before collection. Investigators were captured on video nudging it with their foot, picking it up without fresh gloves. Independent experts hired by the court would later find both samples were likely contaminated. The knife DNA could not be reliably attributed. The bra clasp had traces of 4 other individuals, including a man unconnected to the case. On December 4, 2009, the jury returned. Amanda Knox, an American white woman, 22 years old, was found guilty of murder. 26 years. Rafael Salcido, a white Italian man, received 25 years. Knox collapsed in the courtroom. She was 22 years old. She had been in Perugia for 2 years, 2 months, and 3 days. She had not been home. Her family in Seattle, her mother, a schoolteacher, mortgaged their home. They hired lawyers. They hired translators. They flew to Italy every month. Knox spent those 4 years doing what people do when there is nothing else to do. She studied. She learned more Italian. She wrote. She waited. Outside, the internet was arguing about her. Forums debated her guilt. True crime communities built elaborate theories. A woman was in prison and the world had made her into a character. In 2011, the appeal court took an unusual step. They ordered an independent review of the forensic evidence by experts with no connection to either side. The independent experts' conclusion was unambiguous. The knife sample was too small and too contaminated to be reliable. The bra clasp showed signs of environmental contamination from sitting on a dirty floor for 47 days. The prosecution had built their case on 2 pieces of evidence. Both pieces had now been independently found to be unreliable. They had nothing. On October 3, 2011, the appeal court acquitted Amanda Knox and Rafael Salcido. Knox had been in prison for 1,427 days. She flew home to Seattle the next morning. She was 24 years old. 3 years of her 20s had happened inside a stone building in Umbria. Italy wasn't finished. In 2013, Italy's Supreme Court annulled the acquittal, not because new evidence had emerged, because they found legal errors in how the appeal court had weighed the existing evidence. A retrial was ordered. Knox refused to return to Italy. She stayed in Seattle. The trial proceeded without her. In January 2014, an Italian court convicted Amanda Knox a second time. In absentia, 28.5 years. She was now, legally, a convicted murderer, living freely in the United States. Because the United States does not extradite its citizens to face charges they have already been acquitted of. She was 26 years old, twice convicted of a murder she did not commit, working as a journalist in Seattle. Waiting. March 27, 2015. Italy's Court of Cassation issued its final ruling. Knox and Solicito were acquitted. Definitively, the court noted there was no credible evidence connecting either of them to the murder. The investigation had been, in the court's language, marked by investigative amnesia and culpable omission. 8 years, 2 trials, 2 convictions, 2 acquittals. A woman spent her entire 20s inside a case that should have ended in 2008, when they found Rudy Guede dancing in Germany. Giuliano Mignini, the prosecutor who drove the case against Knox, was himself convicted of abuse of office in 2010 for his conduct in the satanic cult investigation. He was acquitted on appeal in 2010. He retired from the Knox case in 2014. He has never apologized. Patrick Lumumba, the innocent man Knox named under duress, was released after 2 weeks. His business suffered. His reputation in Perugia was damaged. He later sued Knox for defamation. He won. She was ordered to pay €55,000. Knox has said she is sorry for naming him. She has said she named him because the police suggested his name during interrogation. The truth of that interrogation room, in the absence of any recording, is something we will never fully know. Meredith Kercher's family, her parents, her sister, her brother, they have consistently said the same thing. They believe the full truth of what happened that night has never been established. Rudy Guede was released in 2021. He served 13 years for the murder. He gave an interview in 2023. He said Knox and Solicito were present that night. No evidence has ever supported this claim. Amanda Knox is 37 years old. She is a journalist, a podcaster, an activist for wrongful conviction reform. She has given hundreds of interviews. She has never been able to give the one interview everyone wants, the one where she stops having to explain herself. No one has apologized to her. Not the Italian government. Not the newspapers that called her a she-devil. Not the prosecutors who struck her during interrogation. And Meredith Kercher, the 21-year-old British Indian woman who came to Italy because she loved Europe, who wanted to be a journalist, who walked home on the night of November 1st and never arrived. Meredith has been the backdrop of someone else's story for 17 years. She deserved better than this story. She deserved a different story entirely. The question this case leaves is not whether Amanda Knox was guilty. The court answered that. The question is simpler and harder. If the DNA evidence had pointed to Knox from the start, if the contaminated samples had been hers, would the result have been different? Would any of the scrutiny have happened? Or does this system only examine itself when the accused is white, American, and able to mount an international media campaign? Patrick Lumumba, a black man from the Congo, spent 2 weeks in prison on a coerced statement. His case received a fraction of the coverage Knox has received. The international outrage machine did not mobilize for him. Rudy Guede, a black Italian man from Ivory Coast, is the only person serving time for Meredith Kercher's murder. He maintains he was not alone. The Italian court found no evidence to support that. It is, at this point, his word. And the word of a convicted killer is not evidence. We know who killed Meredith Kercher. He is serving a sentence. What we don't know, and what we may never know, is whether he acted alone. And that question, the one that was never cleanly answered, is the one that kept this case alive for 17 years. and the one that will keep it alive for 17 more.